rather than the traditional introduction for Commentator's Corner, this is a very, very special episode because a big announcement hit the internet this time last week. And what's more, it's something that has been sorely missed within the sim racing community. Not only is it going to be the main topic of discussion for this very special episode of Commentator's Corner, episode 61, my guest will be the person that voiced over this video coming up shortly, as you're going to find out right here, right now, who my guest is and what we're talking about here on episode 61. Let's let the video do the talking, shall we?
February 2021. The Traxion team pulls onto pit lane for the very first time and joins the circuit. The goal? To provide the latest news, reviews, guides and entertainment to racing game and sim racing fans around the world. As they began to lap, the tyres came up to temperature. The team found their rhythm. They had all the fuel they needed to last a full stint. For 2.5 laps, the car forges a meticulous path through the traffic, gaining speed and finding time in the process. Until suddenly, disaster strikes. The damage was severe. A black flag was shown, and the team's future looked bleak. Many questions were left unanswered. Although the desire to be out on the circuit never waned, in the neglected pit stall, the damaged Traxion machine remained. After 6 months of dormancy, on came the garage lights. And then, Traxion is back.
Well, it's finally time I got another Scotsman on this show, and I've got a really good friend with me, John Munro. John, it's been a while, my good friend, but how are things? Are you keeping well? I know you're a very, very busy man at the moment.
It has been a long time. We used to catch up a lot more often than we have done the last year or two, but it's for good reasons, because I know we're both very busy all the time. But no, I've been very good. I've been, making my way in the, professional sim racing industry in the last few years, which has been really nice. And I've been continuing with the real racing stuff, and I've moved a couple of times, so there's been plenty happening, but yeah, generally speaking, everything's been really good.
Okay, so John and I actually, we met through Downforce Radio, which this show is also broadcasted on as part of the regular programming. But how did you get bitten by the motorsport bug, John? Because everyone has their own unique story.
Motorsport bug is an interesting one. My dad was a hill climb and sprint competitor in Scotland, and he started about 3 years before I was born, so I would argue it was through that I got the bug. But as a kid, it was just like motor racing over everything else. So I was actually more into motorsport than my dad, which is quite funny. So he loves it. Don't get me wrong, he absolutely loves motorsport, and he obviously competes. But when I was younger, I would just consume as much motorsport as I could through playing video games, the old Toka touring car games, when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and obviously, getting my first PlayStation 2, I was playing Toka Race Driver and Gran Turismo 4 and all of these things, and just watching as much Formula 1 race footage as I could on, back in the day, I think it was Google Video back in the day, and YouTube and all these things, and I would just watch like old 80s, 90s Grand Prix all the way through. I'd apply my own horrendous fake commentary when I was a kid to these videos, and I think it was just a mixture of all of these things. I also loved Matchbox cars, Hot Wheels, all of these things too, so I was just bitten very, very hard at a very young age from multiple angles, so it was kind of inevitable. There was no way I was going to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite cool about, your dad doing, hill climbing and sprints, which, and then you becoming an even bigger motorsport nut or petrol head, whatever you want to call it, than him. Was he quite surprised and taken aback, or is he like saying, oh, actually, he's taken that chip off the old block status a little bit further in his respect?
I don't know. I think the truth is, my dad would be into motorsport to the level that I am if the media was around when he was my age to be able to consume it as much. If he had the access that I had to old F1 races and all of these sorts of things, and obviously the time I had as a kid, he didn't have as an adult when I was growing up. So I'm sure he would have been just as passionate about these things, but I was given the opportunity at such a young age to get super invested in it that it just made that grow. So no, he's delighted on. To be honest, he comes with me to every single race event that I attend nowadays. We still compete together in sprints and hill climbs, and every circuit racing event he travels up from the north of Scotland, so like north of Inverness, just to come down and take the motor home. I'll stay there. He'll support me. So he is madly invested in it all and everything as well. He's not so into likes of Formula One and stuff these days. He couldn't tell you all the drivers and all the teams just because he doesn't have an interest on that level. But in terms of actually, club level motorsport, getting involved, and also with sim racing, he'll watch all of the stuff I'm involved in or I've told him that's good, and he just loves that stuff. So I think for him, he's been delighted that he's had someone to share that passion with from within the family, which is really cool. Even my mum got into racing a few years ago as well, doing some sprints and hill climbs. So it's definitely something that runs in the family, which is nice.
Family affair. That's a pretty good way of putting it, so to speak, John. But when did you first start competing in IRL racing? Because obviously you mentioned about your dad doing sprints and hill climbs. Is that where you got your start, or was it a slightly different path from your perspective?
It was really that the circumstances were kind of fortunate the way it worked out. I did actually have a go-kart when I was younger, but I never went racing in it. My dad had bought the go-kart, just a cheapest thing he could find, just to basically give me a chance to get out there and drive on a circuit, because he would have loved to be able to do that as a kid. You know what it's like when you've never driven anything real or mechanical. You always want to just get out there somewhere with something with an engine and experience that. So he invested in a go-kart, took it home, massive surprise to me at the time, and we would then go to my local kart track just so I could get out there on circuit. And I probably I didn't enjoy it, or I wasn't as invested in it as you might have thought. Just because I don't know if I was just a bit nervous or the amount of effort or being worried I was going to do something wrong. But I enjoyed going to these sprint events and spectating there just as much as I enjoyed kind of taking the kart out for some runs. It was always, I guess, for me, cars that really did it for me. I was never massively enthusiastic about karts. I never fell in love with different types of karts, 2 strokes, 4 strokes, all of these things. Whereas cars, I'd always had like a passion for, I guess, the differences between them and everything. And with the real racing, my ticket in was through sprints and hill climbs. So when I was 16, as soon as I could get a race license, I'd been around the paddock forever. I was always going to be taking part. My dad had a single-seater at the time, and the plan was to do a year or two for me in like a Citroen Saxo, basically, just a really bog standard road car to get some experience, and then move into something a bit quicker in the future. But fortunately, as it turned out for me, the car we bought to do it failed an MOT, and the chassis was beyond repair, so we couldn't actually compete in it. And I was left in a situation where my dad knew how desperate I was to do it. I'd done pretty good sim racing at the time. I was quite a high level as a kid. And my dad said, okay, well, the Citroen's in the bin, so I tell you what, let's just have a go in the single-seater and see how you get on. So it was basically, when I was 16, turned up to the British Sprint Championship in my dad's single-seater, sharing with him, had no idea how to use the clutch, how anything worked, but I just went straight out there and competed, and yeah, had a huge amount of success in the first year, to everyone, including my own surprise, and from there it just kind of went on.
Yeah. But then, of course, that career has sort of expanded. You've done the Race of Remembrance multiple times over the multiple years at Anglesey. A very, very a great event in its own right. Obviously, around the Remembrance Day weekend. I mean, it's an event I've never gotten the opportunity to get to, normally because my calendar is normally intertwined with everything else that happens around the globe. So there's so much on my bucket list that I'm unable to attend. But just for the folks at home that don't know of the Race of Remembrance, just tell us a little bit about it and how you got involved with racing there.
Oh, it's really special. I actually first heard about the Race of Remembrance. It was myself and my dad watching Sky Sports F1 over the Christmas period, I think in 2014, and we saw a documentary about it. I think it was the second ever Race of Remembrance, or maybe the first. And it just looked amazing. At the time, we weren't circuit racing, but we were going to be circuit racing the next year in 2015. So that was kind of how I first heard about it. Did my first year of circuit racing in 2015, and it was in single make Mazda MX-5s. It was MX-5 Super Cup, and I was racing with a team called Blink Motorsport, and we were doing pretty well. I was competing with some old touring car drivers, and we were kind of fighting amongst the top 10. and because of that, I got engrossed in the MX5, I guess, circuit racing community in the UK. So when the year came to an end, we'd actually had to pull out of the season halfway through just because of budget restraints. Did a couple of sprint and hill climb events again, and right at the end of the year, a seat basically became available for Race of Remembrance through a Scuzzle Motorsport who were running a Mazda MX-5, and we just looked at it and thought, well, I've done racing in the Mazda now for the season. We've got a tiny bit of budget left over because we pulled out halfway through, and this is an affordable seat, and there was some well-respected people within that, so we just basically sent them a message, and that was how we got involved. And since then, honestly, I've done a lot of Race of Remembrances. I think I've lost count. I've probably competed in about 6 of them since then, or maybe 7. The chap who was heavily involved in organising it, a guy called John Earp, he was very much involved with Mission Motorsport and James Cameron in terms of organising the event in the first place. It was actually his race team that I started racing for in 2016 and through 2017, and he always had a car in the event. He was always a big part of it. So it kind of got to this stage where, I was competing for John Earp's team at the Race of Remembrance year on year, having watched him in 2014 appearing on this documentary talking about the event and being heavily involved in it. So it was kind of a surreal moment to realise that. But essentially, yeah, for anyone who's not been, I'd recommend going. It's all about, obviously for those who are veterans or have been involved in the armed forces, it's a chance to reflect and think about lost ones, but doing it in the context of a motor race where everyone's together. It's a family feel. No one takes it too seriously. Well, that's a lie. People do take it seriously, but there's always a wider picture. If you have a bad race, it's still about getting to the finish. It's still about camaraderie, helping your rivals get back on circuit. So it's just a magical way to spend that poignant weekend for people who are involved in that side of things.
I mean, apart from obviously running in the MX-5, you've also run with BSCS Motorsport in the Lotus Elise S2 A-Class car, Class A car, which is a bit of a beast. I mean, everyone loves a lightweight pocket rocket like a Lotus Elise. That must have been a bit of an interesting development, because obviously with a Mazda MX-5 Cup car, you're going from front-engined rear-wheel drive to mid-engined rear-wheel drive, and it's more of a coupe. So you've really got to sort of try and change your driving dynamics, and obviously working with the team. That's another opportunity that you've had over the last couple of years. The Elise is a very different animal to a Mazda, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It's funny though, because when I started, I was obviously driving single-seaters with loads of downforce, not huge amounts of power, but enough power and no weight, so that the speeds were incredible. And I was really successful in that. I did well in the single-seater. I think that really suited my driving style, and I was getting some really good results across the UK. So for me, jumping into the Mazda felt like that was outside of my comfort zone, having to think about momentum, mechanical grip rather than aero, all of these things. And I did get used to that, obviously, and was okay in the Mazda, but going to the Lotus was kind of something in between, because it's something with a bit more downforce, a bit more power, nothing like a single seater, but I knew how aerodynamics worked and I knew how I could take advantage of downforce. And I actually think the Lotus suited my driving style more than I would say it suits the Mazda. I've adapted over the years, of course, but yeah, the Lotus was just so much fun to drive. It was actually easier for me to get up to speed in that. And obviously, when I'd been racing in the Mazda in the Club Endurance Championship at that point, it was kind of in the slowest class on the series, so I was constantly trying to punch above my weight and fight with the guys in the class above, or try and take wins in the bottom class. But jumping in the Lotus, I was straight into Class A, the top class, and it was actually a lot easier because the car was easier to drive. I was having to put in less effort and just be nice and smooth and everything with inputs, but I was out front, getting lap records and winning the race, and it was like, it must have looked harder because it was all happening at a higher speed, but I was actually about to jump back into the Mazda for the race the next day, where I'd be way more stressed, pushing way harder just to try and get the lap time out of it. So it was kind of like in a weird way, a bit of respite jumping into Lotus, but they're difficult when they go wrong. Put it that way. If you lose the back end, they rotate very, very easily, so it does create a bit of a different challenge.
That's the problem with having a composite fiberglass chassis on a Lotus Elise as well. But folks, there's actually a first that's happening here. If anyone might see to John's immediate left-hand side, there is a race helmet, and I've also got several over my left-hand shoulder as well. So
it's got a little bit more. I think the one I see there has got a little bit more heritage than this one, right?
Yeah,
it's still got the flies on it from this weekend at Anglesey.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of Ayrton Senna's passing at the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola back on May 1st. Then, of course, that same weekend, the big incident in pre-qualifying for Rubens Barrichello, and then we lost on Saturday qualifying through Aquamuna Rally at over 200 miles an hour, Roland Ratzenberger. Um, and then, of course, we got a bombshell drop that everyone was waiting for, and it was finally confirmed that Adrian Newey was leaving Red Bull in quarter one of 2025. Um, what series, apart from your own real life racing, do you actually follow? Because there is so much. There's a lot of people that you and I both see on all the relevant big social media platforms: Facebook, X, Instagram, whatever. Everyone seems to follow Formula One. Are you a lover of all forms of motorsport, be it two or four wheels, or are there certain categories that you sort of gravitate towards?
How long have you got, Alex?
How long's a
Um,
piece of string?
right. I follow as much as I can. Realistically, I don't obviously have the time to watch full races in every series, just because I've got a lot happening in my life.
Hmm.
I do a lot of real racing as well. I do commentating. I do other stuff on the weekends. So for me, time is very limited, which is a problem because I love so many different things. So I follow, WRC. I catch every single rally. If I rewatch the stages or I catch highlights if I can. Big rally fan. Formula One less so at the moment. I'll watch the races live if I happen to be available and I can get access to a phone or a stream. But generally speaking, I don't mind if I just have to watch the highlights. It's not my favorite series. For me, I prefer watching IndyCar live. World Endurance Championship, huge for me at the moment. Obviously the rally, British touring cars. I'll follow those weekends. I used to be a massive follower of the MotoGP series as well on two wheels and the British Superbikes. So I would watch, Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP, and then if British Superbikes was on as well back in the day on Eurosport, I would follow those as well. That's changed a little bit since MotoGP has moved to paid viewing services. But yeah, I mean, I could go on honestly, Alex. I try and follow the Fanatec GT World Challenge series as well.
Hmm.
That's more of a recent thing, and I think focus shifts over time. So some seasons I'll be heavily invested in the Sprint Cup and NASCAR, for example. Like this season, I'm catching every single set of highlights for that, and I'll make sure on Sunday night when I'm going to bed, I'll listen to it if it's on. And V8 supercars as well. Over the years, sometimes I get more invested. If there's a season where it's a bit quiet, I'll drift to something else. But I basically just try and cram in as much as possible. If I can't watch it live, at least see the highlights and the results. And if something's getting very exciting, I'll do my best to catch it live as much as possible.
Yeah. Let's get on to the commentary side of things. Now, the first time I knew that John Munro was an avid sim racer was thanks to the Team Brit Summer Series, where I saw your name on the grid on ACC and I went, God, it's just like you bump into people at the most unlikeliest of situations, and this is all during lockdown in 2020 when we're all confined to quarters, so to speak, if you want to use a military term there. But when did sim racing become sort of quite important for you personally? And we're not talking from like say training for races, but sort of like the sheer fun, the sheer passion of going like, oh, this is something else I can do where I can get my adrenaline fix.
There was two stages to that really. Sim racing actually started it off for me, where when I was younger, I played video games as I talked about earlier, Gran Turismo, Tokyo, all these things. But I did get into sim racing very, very early. I got onto iRacing when I was probably younger than it was allowed to, maybe 12 years old. Running with my Logitech Wingman wheel, and that was basically inspired by the enjoyment I'd have from the likes of Race 07 and all these games growing up, where I would play properly. I'd have my wheel set up, and that would be a massive hobby of mine because I couldn't race in real life and I wasn't racing karts. So it started at a very, very young age. I took it when I kind of got introduced to the more serious side, iRacing and R Factor leagues and stuff like that. Touring pro series. I got heavily, heavily involved, and that was my thing. I would do 2 league races a week. It was all broadcast. I was competing against Stoffel Van Dorn and all these kind of people. So this
Hmm.
was back in like 2012, 2013. Started even earlier than that, and that ran until I left school and moved to university in Glasgow. which was 2016. Basically, I didn't have space, and I had a lot going on in my life. I was starting uni, no space for a rig, so it all basically got put on pause, and I stopped sim racing. And that was also, of course, the year where I'd just gotten started real racing as well, a couple of years before that actually. So my interest kind of transitioned from sim racing, because that's all I could do, to real racing because that was all I could do. And but then I got a job in VR simulators in Glasgow, so that kind of combined both things, because I was racing on the weekends, doing uni through the weeks, but also working shifts at a simulator centre in Glasgow. So it kind of got the bug going again for sim racing. And then COVID happened and lockdown in 2020, which leads us to what you were just mentioning there. My debut on ACC was in that series,
Hmm.
and that all came about just because lockdown, we were stuck indoors. I knew that I had a hobby I could enjoy from indoors, so I went and drove off to buy a G29 from some stranger a day before the everything shut down. And I got myself, fired up on my old gaming laptop, and eventually had to invest in a kind of budget PC, and got back into it. So that was, I would say, the start of stage two of my sim racing career and enjoyment. And obviously, since then, it's gone on to become a much bigger thing in my life going forward. But there was probably a while in between where I didn't think sim racing would necessarily come back into my life as much. And then there was a period when I was younger where it was the main thing again. So I've definitely gone through peaks and troughs with it.
Hmm.
But for me, it's real racing and sim racing both sort of take turns in being my top priority. And it's the problem I've got is it's impossible to maintain both to the same level of commitment. I can't do endurance sim racing on the weekends, or commit to many league races at the moment, because I do it as a day job and I'm away racing on the weekends, and I've also got my other interests in life. So yeah, it's hard to cram it all in, but yeah.
We have to give a shout out to our good learning friend, Mr. David Christie, who always, whenever we were commentating, me and David, he just go, "I'm just absolutely disgusted at how quick John Munro is," and it was always a running gag, folks, because I mean, David's been one of the first inaugural people that actually jumped on board as a guest. And funny enough, there's a little bit of correlation between a topic that we're going to get onto very, very shortly, which is when John messaged me and said, check out this article. And then, of course, we then go into the subject now, which is, of course, Traxion. Because that was a big, big part of your career as not just a person writing about sim racing, but also, going to France for the 24 Hours of Le Mans Virtual, working alongside Ross McGregor, Piers Pryor, Tom Harrison Lord, through the team. But the good news is, and I'm going to actually quote a thread that John posted. Now, this was the 3rd of November last year, saying, yesterday marked 3 years since I started working on Traxion.gg project, months before its launch. Sadly, today was the last day, gutted and grateful all at the same time. What an incredible journey it's been with amazing people. I'll write something proper over the weekend, but in short, just an enormous thank you to everyone who has watched, read, supported and gotten involved with Traxion, whether it's the website, YouTube channel or across social media. The constant love and support has been amazing. The Traxion team, current and former, were all hugely passionate about racing games and motorsport, and hopefully that's come across in our content over the years. A dream of a team to work with, and I know all of my colleagues will go on to do amazing things with the heart emoji and then hashtag keep it pinned. But Traxion is making its official return, and that's why I've got John on the show. Firstly, it's really good that this is happening, because I remember you sending me that link and it saying that Tom Harrison Lord had compiled the 10 best sim racing podcasts, and Commentator's Corner, which was in its veritable infancy, was on that list, which I was blown away by, taken aback. How good does it feel that Traxion's now coming back to where it truly belongs?
Yeah, obviously it's a big thing for me individually, and for my colleagues as well. It's a shame we can't, we haven't been able to pick up everything and everyone, and there's still a lot of things to work through, but it's going to be relaunching in some form, and obviously, yeah, hugely exciting. It's still taken, there's a lot of processing still to be done, I would say, as well. We're obviously recording this, before it's presumably going out. So, we're still in the very early stages of the relaunch, and it's just still trying to get my head around everything and work out what's happening, because it's just been a whirlwind for the last few weeks. But yeah, overall, I'm so excited about it. I feel incredibly motivated to continue what we were doing before, because it was my first full-time job working for Traxion. I'd been doing 0-hour stuff with uni and everything beforehand, VR simulators, as I was saying, and the Traxion opportunity came about to me in kind of a surprising way at a surprising time. And it was basically the off chance. I sent someone a message on the off chance that they might have a job opening of some sort, and maybe I could make the tea and coffee for someone who was somewhat involved in sim racing or racing games. And it just turned into something very, very special from that. So yeah, it was amazing the first time round. Obviously, we were gutted for it to stop, and I've had some amazing things happening in the middle, in between as well, which is obviously taken. It's made this whole transition back to Traxion bittersweet. As amongst all the great stuff, it's obviously really sad as well that I'm having to cut short my time on other projects. But overall, I'm just so excited, Alex. So super motivated, and just grateful that the chance is being given for us to actually achieve what we set out to achieve in the first place, and keep building on that momentum that we had.
I think Traxion.gg, when it was around the first time, for me was, one of a multitude of sources that I would always read, and also watch the videos as well, because it was really, really good how Tom really carries himself so well. He's very articulate in many respects, but also gets to the nitty gritty. There's no BS. There's no mucking about. It's like, this is what we found out, and this is our honest opinion. There's no sort of like trying to sugarcoat anything. When he had like upfront interviews with Thomas Yakamai back in 2022 at the Sim Racing Expo, for instance. And then also all the videos looking at all the different products, Piers Pryor jumping on board with the team, who's now become the community manager at Alpha Live, and is doing quite a bit of work with them. Obviously, he's one of the team that hasn't been able to return to Traxion because Alpha went, well, we want you, and he's jumped on board with them. So all the very best of luck with that, Piers. I mean, he's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He knows his stuff. But I think for me, Traxion was always that one that I felt it was something. There was a bit of kismet there, that it was sort of like the one that I always wanted to go back to when I wanted to sort of like look at different sources. And obviously when I was doing work for Sim Race Unlimited before that shut down, there would always be some reference where, like say, Traxion would actually get a mention, because that was the main direct source. It was just really, really cool to have, it encompassed everything from community to competitions to products to software. And that really is part of the ethos of Traxion. Is so like it's warts and all. It's just like we'll cover as much as we can. And it always was of a very, very high quality, because I knew that, Tom, everyone knows, is a blooming machine. Like the amount of content that guy can literally drum out puts a lot of real life journalists, I think, out to pasture, so to speak. But it was just lovely to to hear from my perspective, obviously with being involved with Southwest Vision, and then hearing about I was hearing through the grapevine, and I was hearing everything that was going on, and then hearing directly that it was happening. I was just like, finally, something that has been sorely missed for probably over 6 months now is coming back. You mentioned about the fact that there's still a lot to process, because obviously you've been doing a lot of stuff with like Race Anywhere in the meantime. You've also been doing commentary. You've done the Motorsport UK British GT Esports Cup at times. I still remember when you were doing the RF2 GT Challenge over at the studios at Silverstone with a few people, including Lewis McGlade, who I still haven't been able to get on this podcast yet. Lewis, I know you're a busy man. I'm coming for you. I don't care.
Come on, Lewis.
Come on, Lewis. Stop playing your golf. Well, I mean that's one of the things, but I think that it is a case that there needs to be platforms out there that really celebrate and champion sim racing, and Traxion, in its first 3 years, 3.5 years of being operational, was very much one of those talismans, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we didn't know exactly what it was going to turn into. We were just briefed with essentially creating a sim racing space, whether that's for community, whether it's for up to date news, correct information, passion as well. We just wanted to create a hub for all things sim racing that would essentially lift the space. Obviously, the owners who we were under before and set us up Motorsport Games, they were producing video games, so there was a thing there where we weren't Motorsport Games marketing tool, so they could have obviously tried to make us a fake marketing tool for Motorsport Games and just promote their games and all that kind of stuff. Which, yeah, you can imagine there's certain things that would be a conflict of interest there. But we were always just briefed with, you from an independent point of view, celebrate everything that's great about sim racing. Go out there, find out all the information, report back, help people get the most out of their sim racing, because all we want to do is lift the space and make sim racing as good a place to be as possible, with as much information and help out there that will attract more people to it, and also just demonstrate how fun it can be. So I think the key with Traxion was getting the right people involved. You talked about Tom Harrison Lord already. Incredible journalist. Ross McGregor as well, who's been working under him. He's a good friend of mine, has been for years, and I was so grateful that we got him involved as well, because he's been brilliant. And likes of Osley, video editing, came along from What Culture with Rich as well, who was presenting. And the two of them just lifted the quality of everything on the video side. I learned a huge amount through Osley and Rich, and a bunch of other people that I could go on and name 10s, 20 people that have been involved, that have been super helpful and just made it what it was. And I think the key was just having a really good team that loved sim racing, that wanted to bring out the best in it, not just beat it down for clicks and views. Just, if something was bad, we'll tell you why it's bad, and we'll go over it in a kind of methodical way, and balanced way relative to what it is. But if something was good, we want to tell you about it, because you should also be experiencing it the way we were. So that was key for me. And as you say, I think with sim racing, to try and apply some, I guess, professional journalism that Tom was doing, and the research we put into the videos and stuff, we just wanted to provide a source that people could trust. If it's news, we wanted to be direct from the source, where you could actually hear from the CEOs and the people involved directly. We weren't spreading rumours and speculation. And from a video perspective, it was a similar sort of thing. We speak to the developers, we get given opportunities to test stuff, and we'll just learn as much as possible as we can, and we'll just show you our experience of it and share as much info with you as we can. So, there's many different facets to it, but all in all, it was just it was such an exciting thing to be a part of, and also the way it kind of went from being quite a small thing where a few people might have heard of the name, but it was quite niche and not much, to where it was 6 months ago, 80,000 subscribers, multiple broadcasts of Le Mans Virtual and all of these things. And we'd had some amazing opportunities within that as well to go to events. I was over in Italy only a month before it got shut down, doing stuff with Sabelt over there, and going to Monza as a guest of Ferrari AF Corsa. And going over to the Rennsport events in Munich and in Katowice as well. So many incredible opportunities through that, and yeah, it was just a special thing to be part of.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous of you when you got to try out those Savolt rigs. I mean, because for those people that don't already know, I'm actually head of communications with Southwest Vision. One of our clients are Savolt Sim Racing. So at some point, hopefully at this year's Sim Racing Expo, I will be going to the rigs, and I will be saying, "Yep, give me an hour, I'll be back." And because I mean, I can't drive as well as John on a sim. Quite plainly put, I'm better on a microphone. That's what a lot of people know me for. But, like literally last year's Sim Racing Expo, for instance, even though from a commentary perspective, my schedule was quite loosey-goosey a little bit, even when I wanted to try and get I was like thinking, yeah, I really want to try out that. I really want to try out that. I want to give that a go. Because obviously at some point, there will be a chance when I will get myself a sim rig, I will actually start racing and trying to gather tips from individuals such as this good man here, just to get an understanding. Because from a commentator's perspective, by having an understanding of the platforms, really can help you to enhance the coverage. Because obviously, yeah, with any broadcast, you and I both know, having been in the commentary position in our own respective rights, that by having an understanding of the physics, the dynamics of a particular sim, can actually work to your advantage, and thereby you're also being topical to the community, who, let's not sugarcoat this one, they're very knowledgeable, and they can smell a rat and can sense it very, very quickly. So it does always pay to to have a go. Like I think the sim that I've spent the most wheel time on, RF2. I've done some iRacing, I've done some ACC, I've done a bit of Race Room. I did that at 2022 at the Nürnberg Messe for that year's Sim Racing Expo, and just got an understanding. So from my perspective, I now understand that in my position as not only a real life commentator, but also within the world of sim racing, by having that additional knowledge. I mean, especially when you could probably go into a lot more detail than I could, John. It does really work to your advantage when you're explaining that to the audience, whether they be newbies or whether they be people that have been in the sim racing community for over a decade.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a weird one because for me, my initial, I guess, interest in racing, I was just as much wanting to be a commentator as I was to be a racer. Um, that's what I was saying. When I was younger, I was commentating over events and stuff like that, and that was my thing. And that just came from a love of racing. But when I kind of, I guess, got experience in some racing and realized I was okay at it, and then did real racing and was doing okay in that as well, it kind of transitioned to being a driver. So I've kind of gone full circle with it. Where now doing videos for Traxion, I'm driving and I'm racing, but I'm also essentially talking and commentating and delivering information. And you're right in that my various experience in sim racing, I'm not at the highest level of any particular sim. I'm decent. I can do well. I can hold my own, put it that way, in a decent level of competition across quite a lot of different sims because of the years of experience I've had. But I'm not right at the top level of any sim these days. If I was to jump in one of against the world's best, I would get thrown out. It would be rubbish. So, but having enough experience and enough speed and things to be able to at least give a perspective of what a driver at a high level is going through, having to find that those last few tenths of a second, knowing how difficult it is to set up the car where it's quick but also consistent and you can catch it and everything. I think that really helps because I love communicating things with the audience. The main thing for me is I want them to enjoy a race as much as I am enjoying it. So if I'm commentating, my whole perspective is give the audience insight into why I'm enjoying this race. So if it's because there's a really good championship battle and and the guy who's third could be jumping into the lead, or if it's because I've noticed there's a young rookie doing his first event and he's actually lapping very, very close to the top times. Whatever information I'm picking up through my racing experience and being able to analyze data and everything, I just want the audience to see that and then be able to enjoy it as much as I do. And I definitely think when it comes to commentating, having that racing experience helps a lot. Just because if something happens, I can quite quickly go, well, I'm putting myself in driver's shoes. What happened there? Was it a mistake? Was it possibly caused by this? Maybe the driver's fuel saving. Maybe this is happening. And therefore, I can give more of a perspective from the other side whilst still being able to communicate directly. So I've kind of, I guess, combined those two things in what I do for Traxion, right? Because it's filming and recording audio whilst driving. So yeah, a lot of fun. And I think you're absolutely right. It's been super helpful to me in my commentating.
Yeah, I think in some respects, from my perspective, not having competitively raced like you have, I've learnt in very different ways in the fact of understanding the physics and dynamics through a real life application. Predominantly with the karting, which I still do to this day, and I'm always asking questions. And I think that if you can be of an inquisitive nature and you can understand what happens when this happens, and like say I commentate on the UK sim races for JP Broadcasting, and a perfect example of the fact of you can correlate in some respects real life karting to a single make series, aka Mazda MX-5s, and you can understand what the car's doing. Where are they going wide? Is the car looking a little bit loose on the back end? Are they going through turn two and one car's just not got the traction it needs to get through that corner in the most efficient way possible, and it's going completely sideways? So there's different ways in how we as commentators have learned our way and to our path to doing that. When you first started doing videos for Traxion, John, how were the nerves? Was it sort of like the old, getting on a starting grid in an MX-5 and the butterflies, literally churning up your stomach? Was it a bit like that? So like saying, I hope this goes all right.
It was to a degree. I think the thing that really helped me was I was in a position that not many people would have the privilege of being in, where I sort of had the time and the opportunity to learn on the job, simply because we Traxion was starting from scratch. So we didn't have a massive subscriber base, we didn't have a following, a viewership. No one knew who I was, no one knew who Traxion were. So I could almost afford to be bad. I could afford to be rough around the edges, and learn with it, because the channel was small enough to do that. If I'd have jumped in, now on a channel with 85,000 subscribers, or a bigger channel even than that, that would create a different kind of pressure, because you'd be needing to perform at a decent level straight away to sort of keep the momentum going, and not having people viewing it and going, oh, who's this guy? He doesn't really know what he's doing. So, I mean, I came in, when I started doing the videos, I did have a lot of experience with commentating in the past. I had a lot of, obviously, sim racing experience. In fact, I sim raced a lot more before making the videos than I do now, because I don't have time anymore. But I think the main thing for me was just trying to be natural, trying to be myself. I'd watched a lot of sim racing YouTube and real racing YouTube and everything. I've always enjoyed that. So I kind of knew what videos would look like, and it was just a case of being myself, sharing the information I had. If I was enjoying something, being able to show that, and learning from it on the job. And there were certain things that I thought I was doing okay at the start, and visual things that I thought, oh, this video looks okay, or this editing. I knew I wasn't super experienced, but it was fine. And then now I look back on it and I'm like, oh, this is awful. Why did I do that? Why do I sound so robotic, or I sound so cold, or my editing skills were nowhere near the visual stuff. There were so many little things that would be so simple to sort that I just didn't have the knowledge and experience to sort. And so I can't watch any old videos now. I just cringe. I honestly just cringe. But the content itself was always kind of there. Like,
Yeah.
my experience level was there. So the crux of what the information that was given when it came to driving and stuff, that's not exactly the thing that's had to develop. It's just been my presenting and editing skills and everything around that. So I've been able to grow with the brand. I've been able to improve all of these skills, and I'm still a long way off, of course. Like, I'm sure I'll be looking back in 2 years' time at videos that I'm making in the next few months, and cringing at things that I've done there. But that's the whole point of anything, right? You improve as you go, you grow older. And same with my commentary.
Yeah.
It's, I started when I was 13 or 14, and now I could never listen to that commentary anymore. But sim racing gave me the opportunity to learn these things and to try these things without the pressure of a massive platform and a massive following. So I feel quite fortunate about that. Well, I know that was a very long answer to your question, but I would say yes, I was nervous, but at the same time, it wasn't live, so there was a layer of pressure gone, where I could, if something wasn't working, I could just do it again. I could change the script, so it was all good on that front.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite good that you actually explained it in quite succinct detail there, John, because I think at the end of the day, yes, we can give a short answer, but sometimes this is the purpose of this show, folks. It's about finding out more information, and hearing it from John directly is actually, it's always quite refreshing to hear different viewpoints from different individuals that have worked their way through a different path. It's like with me, like I was considering maybe to jump into sim racing commentary, maybe 2022, maybe 2023, and then COVID-19 accelerated that, and then I got made redundant. Ended up doing the Road to Sim Racing Expo in 2021, and now I'm part and parcel of the fabric of the Sim Racing Expo. Not just from a commentary perspective anymore. Obviously, with my head of communications role at Southwest Vision, being the lead commentator for the Sim Racing Expo, which is, I can't believe I've said this multiple times already. I've been confirmed right up until 2027, so I'm locked in. So, folks, you're going to have to put up with me at that front, which for some people isn't a bad thing. But coming on to expos, LAN events, it's really good to see that, okay, yes, there have been some events that have done better than others. Of course, I've mentioned the Sim Racing Expo. We can't forget about Sim Formula Europe over in Maastricht every January with Andy Marson. You've got so much going on within the world of sim racing. We've just had big news about the Esports World Cup and some founding member teams with some of the heavy hitters that we know of, like say R8G and quite a few others. Um, Even with the fact that sim racing being still very much a niche within esports, it is kind of finding its way with these LAN events now.
It certainly is. The thing is, these have been going on for a long time. I used to travel from Tain, again north of Inverness, all the way down to Milton Keynes to go to Simply Race to do a 24-hour sim race there and commentate and drive in that. Did that for 3 years in a row with Downforce back in the day. So even back then, there was the GTR 24-hour events as well in Denmark, and I think LAN sim racing was always a thing, but it was, I guess, more of a hobbyist thing and less of a there was less of a serious professional scene on the go. In the last 5 or 6 years, that's taken a big hit, or it's ramped up, I should say, especially from COVID, and Le Mans Virtual became a huge thing, and that was obviously not a LAN event, but it increased the scale of sim racing and the kind of high level esports events and the amount of money being spent on them, because that event was broadcast from a location in Paris, Studio Gabriel. So from that sense, I think big budget esports events became more of a thing. Obviously, F1 esports has gone LAN recently. Rennsport was a huge thing as well, going to those events. And I don't necessarily think they translate as well over a stream as they actually are to be in real life. When I was there in Katowice for the opening round of the Rennsport ESL R1, it was magical. It was so cool to be a part of. The atmosphere was incredible. It's nowhere near as big as other esports like CS:GO and all of these things that attract bigger crowds. But there's potential for sim racing to do a good job on that front, and there were lots of interest and as I say, an incredible atmosphere. So there's a lot of potential there. Obviously, not everything's gone to plan. Certain things with Rennsport, but also F1 esports has been controversial this year, and I think sim racing in that sense has experienced some growing pains. Perhaps maybe it grew too quickly during COVID. Everyone's committed lots of things and lots of ideas, and then there's a little bit of a lull, and people are starting to worry if they committed too much. That's a very generalized statement, but I think there needs to be a little bit of calm and a little bit of stability in sim racing. But we're still in a better position than we were 3 or 4 years ago from that front. And I do think you'll continue to see these LAN events. Sim Racing Expo is a reasonably recent addition to the calendar for each year, and it seems to be going strong. Obviously, as you say, stuff like the Sim Racing, the Expo Maastricht as well, Sim Formula Europe, that had amazing amount of people there, and also just things to do there for people that did travel. So there seems to be a growing need for these things. And I guess for sim racers, they spend a lot of time in their homes speaking to friends online and people they've got to know and race with, but never actually meeting them in person. And these events are just great excuses to actually physically meet people that you've been friends with and been racing with for a number of years. So I don't see that changing too much.
Yeah. Obviously, you've tested a lot of hardware from a multitude of different manufacturers. Moser, Aztec Sim Sports. The list I could go through, we probably wouldn't have enough time for me to get through that list. But I wanted to actually ask you from a neutral perspective, so not affiliated with anybody that you write for or work for, Traxion, Race Anywhere. What we've seen develop in the last week and a half about the ongoing situation referenced Thomas Yakamai being dismissed as Fanatec CEO through a very quick press release from Endo Agi, the parent company, and then Thomas comes out with this sort of like lifts the veil on the Starrug proceedings. So, for those wondering what Starrug is, it is a German sort of bankruptcy initiative whereby a company that is looking to take over a company that is not doing well, apparently, or is looking to short sell the shares, can do so legally over in that part of the world, which I find quite surprising. And then Thomas came out with this long, I mean, it must have been like a 3-page A4 letter. What's your take on what's happening with regards to the power struggle between the current CEO and CFO and the man who was pretty much a positive disruptive force for sim racing within products being unveiled, being a character in the form of Thomas Yakamaya. What's your take on it, John? Because I've just read all this stuff, but I understand it, but it, I don't think the writing's on the wall for this for quite a long time, because I think they may have had their recent meeting that Thomas was adamant about having on May the 6th.
Honestly, with these things, I've learned over the years that you very, very rarely, as someone on the outside, know the true stories. You're just working with information you get given, and you're hearing different things from different sides. Obviously, there are people with vested interests and shares in the company saying this one thing, and then there's Thomas saying one thing, and then there's obviously going to be other things coming from Fanatec themselves, with the people that are responsible for putting out the press releases and have kind of more control over that side of things. So honestly, as I say, I've learned over the years. I don't. I try to just take a bit of a more rounded view from the outside, and all I want from this is for the Fanatec company to come out the other end in good shape. I want, for the consumer, I want them to be able to still buy good Fanatec products, and I want them to sort that side of things, because I know that was a big problem last year, and continues to be a problem with supply and stuff like that. I've personally never had a problem. I've had no links with Fanatec or anything, but I do own some Fanatec stuff. I've never experienced any of the issues, but it's clear that there have been issues on the customer front. So that's one side of things. And as I say, for me, all I care about from that sense is that is that the company can survive, and the consumer can still invest in some good quality stuff. And Fanatec have been right at the forefront of a lot of good development in the industry. In terms of the details and what's been going on behind the scenes, it sounds like it's a lot of it sounds very messy. But having been, I guess, involved in companies where you know a bit more information than the general public, and you see stuff being said online that just is complete nonsense on every side. Everything gets blown out of proportion, and everyone's trying to win the public battle these days with social media. It's as important to win over the public as it is to actually achieve what you need to achieve, because you almost need that public backing to be able to push your side. So because of that, and I've seen so much stuff shared around that's just not true or just not factually correct. I'm very, very cautious with taking a stance on these sorts of things. So yeah, I don't know the ins and outs and the true details of what's been going on, other than what we hear from each side. And I have sympathy for all of those involved, because it does sound like there's a lot of tension and stress, and I think from what I've picked up, Thomas wants what's best for the company and to try and keep it going. But at the end of the day, it's rubbish for everyone, because none of them want this sort of drama around the company. So yeah, I just hope for everyone's sake they come out the other end in a good state, and no individual or party has been totally taken advantage of or unfairly treated.
Yeah, I think also customer service is king, because we all know that with I remember buying stuff in, let's say, the late 1990s, and customer service was not, we didn't have social media, we didn't have all the relevant platforms. So if you wanted to complain, you had to write a letter, folks. Yes, snail mail, in other words. Whereas now, literally, if something goes wrong, bang, it hits social media, and then the floodgates open. Which, social media is a great tool, but it can also be a tool that can burn people. We have this cancellation culture that has been very much part and parcel of the last half a decade, at least, whereby, you know what my social media is like. It's sort of like I'm Mr. Positivity. I don't have, if I have negative things to say about somebody or something, I want to get in touch with them directly and tell them, rather than sort of like just make a complete reality show style drama on X, for instance, or Instagram, which does tend to happen quite a lot. And of course, this being, Fanatec being one of the big manufacturers that we know of in sim racing, alongside Logitech G, alongside Andre and the team at Azatec from Denmark. A man who's pretty much been a visionary when it comes to sim racing product lines in the form of Thomas Yakamaya. I can understand why he's fighting, but he wants to make sure that he does right in order to make sure that at the end of the day, the customers are the ones that need to be looked after. And yes, 60,000 orders on Black Friday last November. Yeah, that just goes to show how powerful a product's marketing can be, because Fanatec have always done it that way. They've, you know, they're they're on the same line as GT World Challenge. No matter where you go in the world, Fanatec GT World Challenge America, Fanatec GT World Challenge Asia, and of course Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, all powered by AWS apparently. But I think, yeah, hopefully we get a resolution where Thomas in some way can be involved, but of course he said in his lengthy statement that he would not come back to a position of management like, say, CEO, which I think is for him probably a good thing. And I think in if whatever happens and Thomas is still involved, I think that will be a great thing for sim racing. If he doesn't, um, there are people that are going to be heartbroken by it. They're going to be upset about it. But, folks, the best thing to do, just let the situation play it out. And if you do know the ins and outs, keep it to yourself, because I'd rather find out from Thomas Yakamai himself if I ever get the chance to meet him in person. I nearly did in 2022. But from you said about memorable moments, like saying going to Milan to Savolt Sim Racing and trying out the rigs there. What other highlights have you had apart from that Le Mans Virtual? Going behind the scenes in 2022 in Studio Gabriel in Paris. What other highlights really sort of stick out for you in the first? Let's call it the first chapter of Traxion.
I think, I mean, it's very easy to talk about the opportunities I had to go to certain events and stuff, because obviously they meant a lot to me. And you've already mentioned going to Milan for Sabel, doing some stuff with D-Box in London was really cool. Been to the Red Bull facilities in Milton Keynes a couple of times, and going to Le Mans as well this year to kind of help with the running of some sims over there. So there's lots of highlights from a personal point of view in terms of doing things and going to places that I'd always been interested in, and like ticking off life goals in that sense. But honestly, for me, the highlights of working with Traxion the first time around came about all the time. It was those embargo rushes where we had a great team working together to produce content for something that was coming out, getting our hands on it nice and early, getting it sorted, and just the buzz of managing to turn around those videos, those reviews, those things that we were desperate to do, and reaching that embargo moment and just having everything go and being in a good position and going home, having a beer, and just being like, yes, we nailed it, we got there. Genuinely, just the camaraderie between colleagues was amazing. We had such a good working environment, and every single person I worked with on that project, some of which are obviously going to be back in now, some of who aren't going to be involved. I made so many great friends, like lifelong friends, and we had such a laugh. I'd say the most fun I had at Traxion, aside from the I guess positive energy of creating something great, or getting to the end, the most fun was certainly recording the collaborative videos. With the likes of myself and Piers playing BeamNG, and me and myself and Rich and Osley doing some truck races on Euro Truck Simulator. Those things where it wasn't really about necessarily bringing information and stuff to the viewers. It was more about having a great time, having a laugh, enjoying ourselves, keeping ourselves motivated for work by just doing something that we wanted to do for no reason other than entertainment. And in doing that, managing to entertain the people that were watching as well. So those gave me a heck of a lot of satisfaction, I'd have to say. In terms of a specific project I was most, I guess, proud of, probably the History of Le Mans thing that we did. As you'll know from speaking to me and have known me for years, I've been equally as invested in real racing as I ever was in sim racing. Like, the two things go side to side for me, and it's not like I'm more invested in sim racing than real racing. It's a passion for motorsport, and that translates to all these different things. But doing the History of Le Mans project, where I was able to essentially do an hour and a half long special covering everything that's happened at Le Mans in broad terms from the 50s all the way through to 2023, that was such a cool thing to do, and it was such a rewarding project to get to the end of, and it really did just increase my love and passion for the Le Mans 24 Hour, which I then managed to go to for the first time that year for the centenary, and that made me pretty emotional. Just being able to pour my heart into something like that on a video term, and then actually being able to experience it in real life, having just done all of that research and work on the project. So yeah, that's a big highlight for me. But I've given you plenty there.
You have. I mean, this is why I always like talking to John. We could chat away for hours, but of course our schedules don't allow us to do that. So this
Sadly
is,
not. No.
yeah, I know, but there will be an opportunity. I know for a fact in the not too distant future where we will be catching up over a drink, over a bevy, and having a good old chinwag. Um, Also, you said about moving a couple of times. You actually moved down to the Northamptonshire area when you were working, when Traxion was actually based in the technology centre, where you also had the likes of Simon Fitchett's uh, location, where he trains all the drivers, which is also part of associated with Formula Medicine Kofigi Performance. And I remember, so like, I went into Simon's bit, and I was like, there's MSGM. Oh, so Traction's not too far away, and I was thinking, God, maybe I should give John a quick call. And I thought, no, I'm actually here to film and do something, like I was working on a project myself. But moving to and from and then back to Scotland, it sometimes does need to happen where you do need to go where um, where the work is. I mean, the same is with me. Like already, I think so far, probably at the time of recording this episode, folks, I've already done 11,000 kilometres worth of travelling. Planes, cars, God knows whatever else. No trains yet. That won't be happening this year, I think, unless I do need to for certain events or whatever.
Cars are better anyway.
Yeah, I know. But it is a case that as part of what we do on a full time basis, John, is that as a part of motorsport, travel is part of the territory. It's sort of like it's your badge of honor, like saying, "Oh, how far have you travelled this year? How far have you travelled this year?" And I always like the week before Christmas when the season sort of like come to that inevitable climax, and I'm kind of like, now I can finally chill out. And then I always remember how much distance did I cover this year? And like the last 2 years, I think in total over 110,000 kilometres for the past 2 years, and I think it could be the same this year. It is good going, and then I look at some people who've done like 3 times that amount. And I'm like, God, someone's got some frequent flyer miles, and I haven't gotten them, depending on where I'm flying to and from.
No, traveling's always a big part. You know, the even just from a real racing perspective, aside from the move for me as well, constantly going down to from Scotland to England to do circuit racing events, sprints and hill climbs in Scotland and England. But you got to bear in mind as well, my dad, still being based where I grew up in Tain, he's got 4 hours before he gets to Glasgow, and then he's got his journey up or down south, I should say. So for him, the local circuit is obviously Knockhill, 4 hours away. The next one is Croft, and that's 8 hours away. So, and he comes to every single event. And if when I went circuit racing, he was at every single event. When we hill climb and sprint, he's always there. I think he's only missed 1 or 2 of my race events ever. So traveling in our family has always been normal. We've always been used to it. I know those roads up and down the UK very, very well, far too well. Even just the weekend past, we were down in Anglesey, and it was not so bad, because I'm now in Glasgow. I'm only 5 hours away from Anglesey. For him, it's still 9 hours, but for us, that's one of the more local events. We're not having to go to Brands or Castle Coombe or Thruxton or anything like that. So traveling's always been a big thing, and moving to England for work was obviously a big move at the time, but we had obviously the Innovation Centre, but also Traxion Studios, which opened whilst I was already down there, not long after, and that's where we broadcast Le Mans Virtual from and do our esports stuff from, but also record our videos and everything. So we had our own dedicated space, and it was just amazing, just brilliant facilities. So cool to be able to do that from within Silverstone. To call your daily commute a B road drive from Banbury to Silverstone, and be able to get into the circuit with your pass and go and park up there every day. For someone who's massively invested in motorsport, it was a really cool thing to just have in the back pocket. Just the thought of, oh yeah, I'm just nipping to Silverstone for work every single day. It was very, very special. But my roots are all in Scotland. My family's in Scotland. My partner's Dutch, and she's living in Scotland as well, and we both absolutely love it here. So wherever we are, whatever we're doing, it's there are so many other factors around it, but yeah, it's been amazing also to be back here in Glasgow, because we love this city as well, so we absolutely love it.
And also, you get a regular chance, obviously, with your other half, who's you've been with now, I think, for close to 7 years. Regular trips over to the Netherlands. How's your Dutch? Is it coming
Uh,
along?
Nay. It's I've got a really good streak on Duolingo if that counts. I no, I'm really needing to get proper lessons with someone one to one because
Hmm.
Duolingo's great and all, you learn lots of individual words, but I feel like I'm good at the Duolingo game, but if you put me in real situations, I'm not very good. And in Holland, everyone speaks incredible English, which I guess is easy to go into your shell, right? And I
Yeah.
hate being bad at things. I really struggle when I'm bad at stuff, and I'm really bad at languages, so I don't really have any confidence to try it. But as I say, I'm learning. I do plan on getting lessons, and we're actually over in Holland in just a couple of weeks for a wedding as well. So possibly around about when this episode's coming out. So yeah, plenty of trips over there. Beautiful country as well.
Yeah.
I just feel very lucky to be able to do as much traveling as I do and experience, living in all of these different places and doing all of these things.
Yeah, I kind of I can understand with regards to the travel. Like say, I've already been to Genk multiple times this year. Still got a few more to go. I've got Latvia, Lithuania on the cards this season. Multiple trips planned for Southwest Vision in Fürth, just outside of Nuremberg. And yeah, it's just great when you get these opportunities to travel. But you know what? We are coming to the end of this episode, and I'm going to throw my usual question. Uh, I hope you've got your thinking cap on, Mr. Munro, because it is
I'm
the
prepared, but I'm so unprepared. I have no
yeah.
idea what you're going to say.
Well, okay, John, your final question on this episode of Commentator's Corner. Firstly, I have to say a big thank you for jumping on board. We finally got around to getting this episode in the can, so thank you very much for that, first of all. John, if you had the opportunity to choose a road car and a race car of your choice, so there's no cost
One of
cap,
each, is it?
one of
Oh,
each, at a
okay.
particular part of road or a circuit,
Hmm.
what would you choose? And tell me the reasoning why.
Right. Easy choice for a car for now because it just over the years it kind of changes, right? I've had phases of different cars, but for me, GT1 machinery, late 90s GT1 machinery has always been right at the top. So I would say either the Ferrari 550, um, or potentially, I mean, the Maserati MC12 GT1 from a few years later. That was special. Just the
Oh
sound of the
yes,
V12,
yep.
obviously kind of similar to the Ferrari in some ways. That always comes to mind. The Centura, which was a lesser known GT1 car that also had a screaming engine V10 from that era, and it kind of drove more like a prototype. I would always pick one of those just for the sequential gearbox, the sound, the nice balance of having to drive it and really slide the car and all these things, but also having high amounts of grip for the fast corners. I would probably drive around Le Mans Circuit des Arts just
Hmm.
because of the history, because it's not a track that you can just drive around. The Nürburgring, Nordschleife, you can drive it. I have driven it in a Suzuki Swift. I've raced around Spa numerous times. It's an amazing place, but Le Mans, you have to be racing in a particular series that uses that circuit on that race week, and that is not something that's very accessible. So, and it's a long circuit, and it's just got so much history. You can really open up the engine, go down the straight. So that's got to be it for me in terms of racing. In terms of on the road, um, very difficult question in terms of a car. I think oh, I'd struggle to think of the perfect road car off the bat, because there's just so many options. I can definitely tell you the bit of road. I would go the Transfer Highway in
Oh,
Romania,
yep.
just
Okay.
because it's special. You'd probably be able to learn it before you went, and you could just properly open up the taps. Um, maybe a this is going to be a really boring answer, but maybe a Porsche 911 GT3 because I love the way Porsches drive. I love the rear engine, rear wheel drive layout. It suits my driving style. Proper drivers' cars. So I would have a lot of fun in that. There'd be lots of older machinery I would love to take as well, but it's so difficult on the spot to think of a road car. I mean, actually, do you know what? Gordon Murray, his new pair of
Oh, the
supercars,
T50 and the T33.
T50, and he's got the yeah, exactly. The one there's one of those, I can't remember which one's which, but the one that's actually a bit more affordable, it's a bit cheaper. I think it's the T33.
Yeah, which Dario Franchitti is also part
Yeah,
of
he's
the
testing it now.
driver development team. They've actually done a really good series on YouTube that
Yeah,
I've been watching about the T50, the T50R, which is the track ready T50, and I think there's a limited run on that. And the T33, the mule's been doing the rounds. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
actually
my current go-to. I think that's like relevant right now. It'll guarantee you if I thought about it for more than 5 minutes, it would change and it would be something historic, something older. But right now, that's the car that gets my blood going the most of the road cars that I can think of. It's the one that I feel most. I'm just most in awe of, and I think Gordon Murray. I actually know someone who's done a lot of work with Gordon Murray, and he just speaks so highly of everything that he does. He's got an amazing brain, and as a car enthusiast, I just think that car is not about the show, it's about what it can do underneath, and it's about the internals and the driving experience. So for me, that as a raw driving experience, if I had to pick something right at this moment, that's the car I would jump in.
okay. You know what? We're not too far apart on the choices that we've made because I'm going to tell John my counter. Right. So with the racing choice, I wouldn't go Le Mans, but I would go Maserati MC12 GT1 in the Vitaphone colours, the black and cyan green, which actually at one point was raced by a certain two-time DTM champion, Timo Scheider. He actually raced that car back in the day. And I would go to Autodromo Nazionale di Monza because you can open the taps up on. But it's the thing is, it is the Temple of Speed, not the Cathedral of Speed, which people do get confused with TT Circuit Assen. I found that out very early on when I started doing sim racing commentary, and I said the Cathedral of Speed. No, and I got like a message on my Discord DMs. No, it's the Temple of Speed
I
at
probably
Monza.
get that wrong every time.
Yeah. So it'd be the MC12 GT1 in the Vitaphone colours, black and green, at Monza, because with that naturally aspirated V12 is just like literally as soon as you go up the gears. Yeah, I don't care that it's based on a Ferrari Enzo, for goodness sakes. I would want to drive that car. Um, car and road choice. I'm actually siding with you on the Transfigurant Highway. I've already mentioned it once. However, there are two cars if I had the choice, but there would be one specific road. And it would be the Stelvio Pass. And if there was a choice between either the GMA T33 or the Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 RS, which is a car that I think is very much under the radar because the GT3 RS is Porsche's go-to, and it has been for well over a decade and a half. But when they went with they brought out the GT4 variation of the Cayman. I still remember when Shmee 150 actually picked up his blue 718 Cayman GT4 from Porsche Centre Colchester, funny enough, which is 25 minutes up the road from me, all those years ago. But the GT4 RS, and I'd want to drive the T33 on the Stelvio Pass. I can't make my mind up, so
Not
I'm
asking for much. Not asking for much.
not actually.
Just a quick shot.
Just a quick shot, But I think with a location like the Stelvio Pass, a smaller, more compact, and more nimble car would be for me the better opportunity just to exploit the excitement and the fun. And also the Stelvio Pass is iconic because you don't have a road as twisty as that in the world, and it's down the hillside, so you've got to be very, very careful as well at the same time.
You know what? Actually, just to add to that as well, that even the transfer Garrison, it is a tight and twisty place. I don't know if the GMA T33 would actually suit it very well. I just want to drive that for the noise and the experience. But being suitable, I'd probably go for something like a Caterham R500 or the Westfield that I'm actually racing in just now because it's a road legal car on road legal tyres. And it's got the right amount of power where it doesn't completely overwhelm the car, but it really does go and it doesn't weigh much. So a car like that where you can get the tail out, play with the rear end on the steering,
Yeah.
that would just be huge amounts of fun for a track for a road like that. I think that would probably be even more suited to it because you just feel like you could use a little bit more of what you've got and just slide the car around with a few less risks if it went wrong.
Well, that's it for this episode of Commentator's Corner. John, thank you so much for joining me, and so glad that Traxion.gg is finally back within the place it belongs into, the sim racing community. Don't forget, folks, you can like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll also find John's social media links in the description down below, along with Traxion.gg to boot. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Commentator's Corner. Goodbye.